Welcome to the show, Larry Hagner.
What's going on, Jason? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Larry. What is up? Here we are. Good to have you on the show to talk about fatherhood, marriage, and family, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and just some kudos to you. So I know I had you on the Dad Edge podcast. We had first of all, it was definitely the downloads definitely tell the story that people really valued it. But also I got comments and emails, and a lot of guys in our mastermind group, man, they raved about it. They loved the message that you had. Your name's been brought up several times in conversations. So your message really resonated with my audience as well.
Oh, that's so cool. Nice. I was like hearing, there's an impact out there because, right, we just talking to mics and we don't always know.
Right, exactly.
Cool. Well, let's start with just who you are, what you're up to in the world, maybe a sentence or two about that. And then I want to kind of backtrack into your story a little bit.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a founder of the Dad Edge. It's a podcast. We also have a community for men called the Dad Edge Alliance. I've been doing that now I've been running the podcast for 7 years, Dad Edge Alliance for 6 years. This is my full-time mission. This is what I do. I am raising 4 young men. I have a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, an 8-year-old, and as of next week, a 6-year-old. And I've been married to my wife now for 18 years. This will be our 19th. I've known her for 26 years. We met in college, and it's an incredible life. I couldn't ask for anything more. And I'm not giving you the highlight reel. There's dark moments and mistakes every day, but I love having a loud house full of energy with boys. I love doing the work that I honestly feel is my purpose and my mission. It just feels amazing to get up and do the things that bring you to life and bring you joy and fulfillment, and you're impacting others. But yeah, that is really my story, and it wasn't always as nice as it is now. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah, and I appreciate that there's mistakes every day, and there's dark moments, of course. So thanks for being in reality there with me.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why, we could back up and say why the Dad Edge. I know you grew up with challenges with your dad, so maybe give us some of the backstory.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could tell. I joke around a lot, and I say, a lot of people are like, "Well, how did you start Dad Edge?" And I joke, and I always say, well, about 10 years ago, I woke up one day, the sun was shining, and I just had this epiphany that I knew everything there was to know about being a good father, and I just had to share it with the world. Of course, people look at me like I'm an idiot, right. Which, of course, that is not the story. It started terrible. It started with a really dark moment, and I'm happy to get there. But yeah, my story, the whole Dad Edge thing, it really started when I was a kid and my own experience with a father. My parents, my biological father and mother were married in 1971. They had me in 1975. I was only about 9 months old before they got divorced, and they were like kids, 21 years old. Really horrible divorce. My dad completely left the picture, and I had no recollection of him. From the time I was basically a baby to 4, no recollection of a father whatsoever. But I knew what a dad was because I remember being in preschool, and I remember dads coming to pick up their kids. And I was like, oh, that's a dad. And I just, in my mind at 4 years old, was like, oh, well, moms just go out and they find dads, right? And my mom hadn't found our dad yet, and it was no big deal. One day, though, my mom told me, she's like, hey, I'm inviting someone over for dinner. We've been dating for a while. I work with him, and I want you to meet him. And I was like, oh my gosh, she did it. She actually found us a dad. This is awesome. So I'll never forget, man, 4 years old. I mean, I'm going back 40 plus years ago. At 4 years old, this man comes walking in our house. And I remember it was cold outside. He was wearing this trench coat, a 3-piece suit, a double Windsor tie. He had a briefcase. He had feathered hair. He had a mustache. And it was the first time I remember a masculine, man coming in my house, white collar, data software engineer. And my mom introduces me to him. And the first thing I asked this guy as we're shaking hands is, are you going to be my dad? Wow. Just smile from ear to ear. I remember it like it was yesterday. I think my mom actually really kind of took that as a sign. And they did get married just a handful of months later. I think 6 months later, they got married. And they were married from the time I was 5 until the time I was 10. And every year that they were together, it just got worse and worse and worse. He was very mentally and emotionally and physically abusive when he drank. When he wasn't drinking, he was a very nice person, big on manners. Everything was yes sir, no sir, please, thank you, excuse me. And he was sort of a weekend dad because with his job, he actually traveled quite a bit. So I didn't see him all that much. But when I did see him on the weekends, unfortunately, there was a lot of drinking involved. And things just got really crazy around my house. When my mom and him got divorced when I was 10, he was gone. I have not seen him since. And I found out about 8 years ago he died. And because he left me a house. And when he died, I was his only living heir. But I really started asking questions right around 10 years old because I knew about the birds and the bees. I'm like, wait a second, these years don't add up. What's going on? So I asked my mom, I'm like, hey, I was like, where did I come from? Because I definitely know now that Joe is not my dad. Who's my dad? And she's like, well, actually, I was married before and you do have a biological father. And she showed me the wedding album and the photos. And I was like, holy cow, look at that. Wow. So 2 years passed by. I'm 12. My mom's dating people, the same type of characters, heavy drinkers, partiers, that kind of thing. Men were kind of in and out. Well, what happened when I was 12, and I won't get into the details for sake of time, but I actually accidentally ran into my biological father and we met. And for the sake of time, I won't go into how. It's a crazy story how, but I won't get into it. But we did meet. And he was remarried at the time. He had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And I will never forget it. I mean, I was like, man, this is so cool. Like I immediately started calling him dad. He would come to my little league games, that kind of thing. We spent time on a weekly basis. And what I noticed is about 5 months into our relationship, everything was pretty good. But I noticed about 5 months, 6 months in, he just kind of started pulling away. And also like there was always like tension around that last month, I remember, and always like this heavy feeling. And the best way I can describe it now is that, if you've ever been dating a woman and you're really into her and she's not into you anymore, but she just hasn't let you know, you're just getting that vibe. That's what it felt like. And I just picked up the phone one day and I called him and I'm like, hey man, like I'm just getting these really uneasy feelings. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but this is the theme. I was like, I'm just getting like these, is something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Like, I just feel like you're not really into this anymore. And he basically told me like, hey, it's me, it's not you. We need to part ways. And I think he was trying to start over in his life. And that killed me, man. It really, really just knocked me for a good one. I gave up on school. I failed the 8th grade, had to do 8th grade twice. I overate, got really overweight. Finally I did 8th grade twice, went to a good high school, went to college, graduated, got my degree in health management and a minor in nutrition, and met my college sweetheart, married her. And then the story really ends here. 30 years old. I'm about 6 years into my medical device sales career, married, first son on the way. We're pregnant. This is 2005. I'm in a Starbucks for a weekly business meeting here in St. Louis with coworkers. And this gentleman walked in and he, for some reason, it got my attention. I looked over and it was my father, the one I hadn't seen since I was 12.
Another chance meeting.
It was crazy. And so one of the women that I was with on my team was like, hey, hello, are you still here? You look like you just seen a ghost. I'm like, I'm sorry. I was like, my father just walked in. And she's like, wait, what? And I told her, and I was like, yeah, it's my father over there. And she's like, oh my God. She goes, are you going to go talk to him? I'm like, no, I'm not going to go talk to him. She's like, well, he's your dad. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking to him. Without another word, I had no idea she was going to do this. She just got up and walked over to him, sat down next to him. And I'm like, oh my God, what is she doing? And I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. And I saw him say, where is he? And he started like looking around, and then our eyes met. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, what do I do? Do I leave? Do I hit him? Do I go to the bathroom? Right. Like, what do I do? And then he's humbly walked over, shook my hand, and he's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. How are you? And he's like, I'm good. I'm good. Are you married? Are you having kids? Or like what? I told him, I was like, yeah, I'm married. I was like, I'm expecting my first son. And he's like, well, we should get together sometime. I'm like, okay. And I just handed over my business card. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't nice.
Well,
I was just sort of in the middle.
He's expecting a relationship after all these years of like no contact, right? Yeah.
So anyway, we ended up meeting for breakfast. And out of that breakfast that was the beginning of now a 17-year relationship. He's still married to the same woman. He's been married to her for over 40 years. I have 2 younger half brothers. I'm actually going to be in my youngest brother's wedding this year. And it was incredible. But what I can tell you is that my mom got married again. She got married a total of 3 times and dated several men in between. And every guy was the same guy, just very toxic, very abusive, a partier, a drinker. And my mom was too. And it was just this crazy childhood growing up. And I really realized back then, I was like, man, like when I'm a father, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to do it well. And what I can tell you, Jason, is for the first 6 years I was a dad, yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. And Dad Edge really got started with a really horrible, dark moment. And, it's hard for me to talk about, but at the same time, it was the beginning of something that is really good now.
Yeah. Wow. And oh my God. Okay. And the dark moment is that the cliffhanger, or is this part of just this
It
story?
is. Yeah. I'm happy to tell you about it. So for the first 6 years that I was a dad, and, it was about 9 years into my marriage was not going so good. It was mediocre at best. Jessica and I were communicating, but surface level. We weren't intimate all that often. I was frustrated with that part of my life because I was like, man, I really want a good marriage. It wasn't terrible. Nobody was going anywhere, but it sure wasn't thriving. I wasn't really patient with my boys. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to connect with them. I wanted to be a good father, but I was sort of doing fatherhood from like an arm's distance. I wasn't beating anybody. I wasn't calling anybody names. I wasn't getting drunk and like,
you're just kind of absent emotionally, physically, kind of like just not there. Present.
Right. I pretty much got my validation in 2 places: my career, because I was really good at that. And at the time I loved doing martial arts and I was really into that. And Dad Edge got started because I had a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time. I had a really horrible day that day. I lost a huge customer, my number one customer in my business, and it was going to massively impact our income for the next 6 to 8 months. A couple other bad things that probably happened that day, and my patience was short. And Mason, my 14-year-old now, 4 at the time, he stepped out of line, and as any 4-year-old would, wasn't his fault, mine. And I spanked him. And I know people are okay with spanking. I swore to myself I'd never put my hands on my kids in a bout of rage or anger, because that's what I went through. But I spanked the kid so hard that he hit the ground. And immediately when it happened, I was like, oh my God. I was like, what did I just do? And I went to help him up. And this is where it's hard. I went to help him up, and he looked at me like I was a monster. Yeah. Like he shuddered. And I'm like, oh my God. And in that moment, I didn't see my son. I saw me as a kid. I picked him up and I hugged him. And my wife, who never emasculates me, she's never disrespectful, she never calls me out in front of the kids, she looked at me and she's like, are you serious? Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, he's 4, Larry. Like, he's 4. My wife never talks to me like that. So when she does, man, I listen. Yeah. Oh my God, what'd I do? Went into my office. I was crying. What do you do when you're an adult and you have a bad moment? You go on social media because you just want to be distracted and not think about it. And that's when Dad Edge got started. And how it got started was I was on Facebook that night and I saw this button in the left-hand corner. It said create a page. I never created a page. I hit that button, and I'm very in touch with my faith. And I swear that was a divine intervention. And it said, what do you want to name your page? And the words, The Good Dad Project, just immediately rolled off my heart onto that keyboard. And that was like just a surrender of like, and it was basically me saying, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm willing to learn. And what I'm going to do with this page, I never did it for a following, is I'm just going to go out and learn something new every day. I'm going to start reading books. I'm going to start seeing a counselor. I'm going to get some coaches. I'm going to go out and really learn how to do this because I don't know what I'm doing. And the biggest aha moment in that moment was I started thinking about things I was good at in my life. One was my job. One was martial arts. There's a common denominator there. I'm constantly going through training with my job, right? I'm constantly learning new things. In martial arts, I'm constantly practicing what I'm learning over and over and over and over again. But there's training and there's learning. And I had never done any of that for my marriage or with kids. And I had this perception of that, well, if I need help in that area, oh man, I got problems and I'm broken. And what I've realized over the years is, that is the common denominator of success. And that night is what sparked everything we're doing now.
Wow. So cool. There's a lot I could drill down into there. But thanks for sharing your story.
Sure.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah. And sometimes it takes us hurting someone, right, to get help, or being hurt ourselves, or just constant failure. After all these years working with so many dads and starting this community, I'm curious, what are the maybe top 3 issues dads come to you with these days?
We actually have hard data on that, because in order for a man to come and do life with us in our mastermind group, they have to fill out an application. So we have to know, like, hey, what has your attention? Like, what
Yeah.
would be what's most meaningful for you to create or to have? We give men choices when they fill out an application. 1 is create an extraordinary marriage. 2, epic connection with my kids. 3, master my finances. 4, leadership. Or 5, master my personal finances more efficiently. 80% of our men identify marriage as the thing that they want most.
Yeah.
And then a close second of that is the connection with their kids. All the other 3 come come third. But what I will tell you is that what I have found is with marriage is that men want to be able to communicate. Like if I drill down, the topic under the topic, it's communication and connection with their wives. And a lot of guys are like, I want that spark, that connection with her. I just don't know how to create it. But that's one big common theme. The other thing is patience with their kids, right? They want patience and connection with their kids. And then the third one is what they're really looking for is tribe, is community.
Mm-hmm.
Is I want to have better conversations. I'm sick and tired of the good, fine, busy answers. Like how's work, how's life, how's the family, good, fine, busy, whatever. I want better conversations to where I can learn from other men. So third would be community.
Yeah. Because so many guys kind of go it alone, right? They feel alone. They have a lot of male friends, but watching the game maybe, but they actually feel alone inside, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That was me too before I started working on myself. But lots of friends, plenty of male friends, but totally alone internally, right? Painful. Cool. I love that. I love that so many men actually want to focus on their marriage. Because at the relationship school, we are more women than men in a heteronormative sort of sense. And it's curious. It's always really cool to meet a community where it's all men actually wanting to work on their marriage. And do you find that, I'm going to assume that most of those guys are heterosexual men?
Yeah, I would say in the past, 6 years we've been doing this, we've had 3 men that are not. But yeah, all of them pretty much.
And so with their female partners, is the primary complaint that their partner is like kind of the pain in the butt, or are they more like, I'm the pain in the ass here, my partner's awesome, she's just waiting for me to show up?
That's a great question. I would say it depends on the individual and how much growth that they've gone through and, ownership that they take just in their life. Naturally, that's what I've seen. But I would say for the most part, I see men who are eager to work on their own skills. They don't necessarily view her as, oh, she's the problem, but they're there to do their own work. In some cases, though, we've seen it to where like guys are just banging their head up against the wall. Sometimes they're like, man, I'm doing all this work and I'm growing and I'm evolving, but I can't seem to crack the code with her. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen often. I would say 10% of the time. It just seems like that particular type of dynamic, it just seems like the other person isn't willing at all to do the work.
Yeah. I get that a lot. What do you say to women listening who say, yeah, there's just no men out there really doing the work and that don't want to really take responsibility and work on themselves to become a better man or father? What do you say to women who think that?
I would say if you look at the majority of men, unfortunately, I see a lot of men who are quietly suffering, right? So I don't want to discredit men, right? Because I think a lot of men have no idea where to go. I think if you gave a man like the map, like, hey, we've got this resource in this community, and if you want to come do work with us, and they'd be like, a lot of guys be like, yes, it's actually what I've been waiting for. This is awesome, right? But I think a lot of guys have this perception that, well, maybe that doesn't exist, or maybe I'm just too broken, or I'm just too busy, right? Or I can't do that because I've got all these other responsibilities. So it doesn't, I don't think it really comes out of from a man's point of view, it doesn't come out of anything lazy. I think it comes from a place of like this perception of like, well, if I need that, am I broken? Like it's almost this identity shift that
like a weakness,
like a weakness. Yeah. Or it's the other thing too, is like, well, I don't have time. And we all have, I'm sorry, but that's a BS excuse. It's totally BS. If it's important to you, you'll make the time.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is the resources, right? A lot of guys, I'm sure you saw this in counseling, right? But if you're seeing a counselor, I remember growing up as a kid, and if you knew your buddy's parents were in marital counseling, oh my God, like they were just, they have problems. Like they were broken, right?
Big stigma, a lot of stigma. Yeah.
A lot of stigma. Yeah.
Yeah. And why do you think you sort of spoke to men not being maybe aware or available to this kind of work, or they're too busy, et cetera? Let's say men are relationally challenged. Let's just make that generalization, right? And what's your theory on why that is? Like, why are men pretty stuck here or struggle with relationships in their marriage?
So I think it happens with a couple different things, and this is just my theory. You would probably know more about this than I would. So I'm going to share my thoughts and my theory, and I'd love to get your input on what you think. Yeah. So I think most men, especially our generation, even more so the generation before us, were, like, hey, there weren't the men who raised us didn't have a whole lot of emotional intelligence, right? They were identified as, I'm your provider, I'm your protector, I'm head of house, right? That's my job, that's my role. When it comes to dealing with your emotions as a kid, like my job is to tell you to man up, right? Man up, stop crying, push it down, that kind of thing. Just deal with it, be tough, right? And what I think what happens is that when you raise a young man like that, he starts to question his own feelings, right? And doesn't he? And I think you're also raising someone who probably is going to deal with anger down the road. And you know this as well as I do. Anger is a secondary emotion. Sometimes we have no idea what we're feeling. We just know that we're angry, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we can't even translate what we're feeling ourselves as men. And then you get married, right? And then think of the example that you had growing up. You watched your parents. I would say the majority of marriages were okay. Some of them were pretty disastrous. It's very rare that I come across a man's like, man, I had like the best childhood ever. My parents are still in love. They make me sick. Right. That hardly ever happens. So you take a man who has probably had a male role model in his life, or maybe no male role model in his life, teaching him for years to repress his feelings. Don't deal with it. Just push through and move forward. Then you see mom and dad and their example of marriage, which might not be so good. Then you go and get married yourself, and you're like, holy crap. Like, I'm not even sure what I'm thinking anymore. I don't even know what I'm feeling anymore. I'm just trying to navigate this the best I can. And then you throw a kid into it and they're like, wow, it's crazy. Yeah. But that's what I think might be happening.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, what I always say, it's just conditioning, really. It's mostly gender conditioning, that how we raise boys.
Yeah.
If you raise boys the way my dad raised me or his dad raised him, and we keep doing that, and then we not only do that in our homes, but we live in maybe sports culture or business culture where it's more of the same. It's like, if you cry on the playground, you're a pussy. If you, have feelings and talk about them and you're sensitive and you want to play with girls, sometimes as a boy, you're gay. Just on and on. Like, boys get the message. Okay, cool. Like, there's a narrow lane that I can express here to fit in and belong. And belonging is the most important thing to me. So I'll do that. And I will disregard and repress everything else that's gets me made fun of or pain or whatever. So yeah, I'm really with you. It's a real problem, and I still feel like we're doing that. So if we transition into you being a dad of 4 boys, you talked about psychological safety. Hey, we have had hundreds of people come participate in our Accepted and Connected event, and it's coming up. We have folks from all over the world attend, from Singapore, Australia, Europe, Canada, South America, and this is Jennifer from Australia, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer. Here's what Jennifer had to say about our 2-day event recently.
I think anyone would find value in it, because conflict is something that you can't avoid in any, everyday relationships. Doesn't matter whether it's your intimate relationship, your family, friends, or if it's, business, like work colleagues. It's always going to come up. And it's sad when you know that people don't always reconnect. They stay in that disconnect stage, and it's sad knowing that if they had the tools, that they could possibly save that relationship and possibly repair it if they had known how to do that conflict sort of repair cycle a lot better as well. So it's sort of life-changing because conflict is something that always is inevitable. It does come up because we all have differences in the way that we view things and the way that we are as a person. I love the way that we branched out into the groups, and I loved how everyone felt safe to be able to share their experiences. And for me, I guess this is going to have a huge impact on my life because I'm going to be a parent soon, and it would be nice to be able to lead by example.
Yeah, Jennifer. I mean, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks for transforming your life and for actually investing in yourself in this way. You can have a transformational experience like Jennifer. Go to relationshipschool.com/connected if you want to sign up. See you there. I'd love to talk to you about how you're raising 4 boys maybe differently than the culture. And I'm assuming, these, we could say they're normal boys or boys who, or maybe you tell us, are they a mix of like a sense, I've got a sensitive one, I've got a sports kid that's totally tough and doesn't do feelings, or like maybe describe a couple of your boys and how are you doing this differently in a culture that is still doing the same thing?
Wow. What a great question. So, creating an environment of psychological safety. I can just speak briefly on that. I was taught that skill, and I would never say I'm a master at the skill, but I guess I'm good enough at creating an environment of psychological safety, meaning the relationship and the connection that I've cultivated with my boys over time. They talk to me literally about everything. There's something, and I'm sure it's not everything. I mean, like, I'm sure there's things they don't, but the things they do bring to my attention, I'm like, wow, I can't believe, like, I would have never said that. But then again, I was raised in the environment with shame, blame, and guilt, right? Like, oh, how dare you? Shame on you for feeling that way. Like that was the dialogue, right?
I can relate.
Right. So we have a few quotes in our house. Number one is, your honesty and ownership is celebrated and never punished. And the same goes for if you bring an idea to the table, same thing. It's celebrated and not punished, no matter what the idea is. Like, we're going to celebrate the idea that you had it, whether or not we're implementing it. That's another story. The other thing too is, you can always safely land here. Bring your ugliness to the family, and we will embrace you. Right? Bring the things that are tough for you to talk about, and we will embrace you. Another thing that I've done too over the years, and I was taught this from a good mentor of mine, is I ask my kids 3 questions every day, and each one of them have a psychological reason behind it. So, like, number one, what was a high point moment of your day? Right? What was something that was meaningful to you versus how was your day? The cool thing about that is it helps get your kids into gratitude, right? Helps them look for the good things about their day. But the second one is a constant mini deposit into psychological safety. And what I always say is, what's something you failed at today? What's something that went terrible today? What was a challenge today, right? And this is where you can build or completely destroy psychological safety. So I'll give you an example. My son would be like, oh, Dad, like, I got a D on the science test. Now, the way I was raised is like, didn't I tell you to study for that? What's wrong with you? I told you to study for that. I told you to get off the TV. Why would you do that? Right. And I already felt bad about the D. So, like, if my son comes to me, he'll be like, I got a D on that science test. And I'm still tempted to be like, dude, like, I told you to get off your phone. Like, I told you to study. Come on, man. But instead I'll be like, okay, tell me more. I don't use the word why, because I honestly believe that why has this, it makes us feel defensive. Like, why did you get a D? Versus like, oh, tell me more. He's going to tell me more either way, but one, he's going to feel good about it, one, he won't. So when I say, tell me more about that, I'd be like, yeah, there were some questions on the test I really wasn't prepared for. I'd be like, okay, well, tell me what you mean by not being prepared for it the way you wanted it to be. And he's like, yeah, there were some questions around chapter 5. I didn't really study chapter 5 that well. I didn't study chapter 6 that well. Those were the ones I kind of bombed. I'm like, okay. Well, that's great awareness. Number one, like, you identify what the gap was. Well, let me ask you this. Based on what you've told me and what you've learned, when's your next test? I'd be like, well, it's next Friday. I'm like, okay, well, based on what you've told me and what you've learned, what would you do differently in between now and the time you have your next test? And they're like, I'd probably study more, and I'd make sure I study the chapters that I thought I knew. right? I probably study more. I'm like, okay, well, how often do you need to study for this next test? And how can I best support you? And they'll be like, I need to study 3 times next week. And if you could just check in on me, and I might ask you to quiz me, or I might ask you to help. Is that okay? Like, yeah, of course it's okay. Okay, awesome. Let's move forward. So I didn't have to do any lecturing in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
All I did was guide him to his own solutions. I don't have to necessarily punish him. He already feels terrible about, the mishap. And anytime that there's, something ugly that happens, I always try to lean on the natural consequences. And I always try to take shame, guilt, and blame out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've noticed, is that when they view me as like, I'm telling my dad something hard every day, right? And he's responding in this way over and over and over and over. So my goal is that when he's driving and he's at the party and he's going to have a few drinks and he decides I need to either call my dad or get behind the wheel of his car, my hope is that he feels good enough. And we've had this conversation. I'm like, hey, just call me. You'll never be in trouble. In fact, I'll applaud you for calling me. Okay.
Yeah.
And that conversation will be very easy. No problem. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Right. And then that's what I want, is this environment where the kids feel very free to talk to us about anything.
Yeah. It's so cool. And I like the room also for the potential of drinking or drugs one day, right? At a certain age, they're going to experiment.
Sure.
That there's a willingness to be there for your kids, in the time that they need it, instead of the shame, blame, guilt thing.
Right.
And I just want to ask, like, do you, because and I just love the vibe of the home I'm getting from you, where the kids feel safe to be who they are, just right what you're after, I think. It's like, hey, this is a safe place to be. And when they get beat up by life, home is the place they can recover, right?
Yes.
So that's
exactly
kind of what you're creating there, which I love. And I think that's such a important thing for the listener here to really grok, is that's, as parents, we want our home to be the safe place, not their friend circle to be the safe place. The home is like number one. And I'm curious how you navigate, now that you have adolescents, drugs, alcohol, rule breaking, and how do you not do the maybe just constant fear of punishment thing that maybe other families might be doing? Like, what is your wife and you's technique there?
Great question. So, we always tell the boys too, like, hey, our environment, our safe house, right? It's not the absence of consequences. You do something wrong, there's going to be natural consequences, right? So you also asked a question there too before, I didn't really answer it, is like, every single one of my boys is different. So like, for instance, my oldest, he'll tell you in as much detail as possible everything about his life. He's just an open book. He's a great communicator. My 14-year-old is more of locked down. Like, he's very stoic. I think he identifies himself as like the strong football player that's stoic and tough, but he's also a good leader. He's got a really good head on his shoulders. So I have to completely talk to both of them differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example of, I think something that you're getting to is that, hey, when a mistake is made, like a big one or even a small one, like what does that look like? So my 14-year-old shoplifted last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out about it because the store he shoplifted from, they posted on social media a photo of him and the kid that he was with, saying, if anybody knows these kids, please contact me or they can deal with the police. I had no clue what would even happen. Not a clue. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I know my kids, they mess up, they make mistakes. I'm not, naive to that, but I really didn't think my kid would ever shoplift. I just didn't think it would happen. And so I dealt with it. I was freaking pissed, man. And I did the opposite of creating an environment of psychological safety because he lied on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my son, I said, hey man, I'm looking at this post on social media. This looks like you and this kid you've been hanging out with for about a month. He was only with this kid for about a month. And I'm going to call this store. Is there something you want to tell me? Because at this point I didn't know he did it. I just knew he was with a kid who might have did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, something you need to tell me? I was like, you will not be in trouble. I said, there will be consequences, right? But they will not be as dire, not nearly as dire as if you're honest with me. You got something you need to tell me? He's like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm like, are you sure? I'm believing you. I get on the phone. The guy's like, yeah, you're both, this kid and your son shoplifted. I have it on video. I said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I went up to my son. I got in his face. I said, get in the car. We're going up there and we're going to make this right. Went up there. I didn't say a word to him in the car. We got out. We went in the back, and the guy who owned the store was a cop for 30 years. And I saw the surveillance video. This kid shoplifted first. He's in my son's ear for like 4 minutes, trying to pressure him to do it. My son was like, no. Finally, he just did it. And I looked at my son and I was really pissed. And I told him, I was like, dude, you're not going to see the light of day for like 90 days. I'm going to take your phone. I was pissed.
Sure.
He paid for the item, and then he was upset. And then I cooled down and I was like, this is so uncharacteristic of him. I don't understand this. So I was like, I went back downstairs, got him, and I was like, let's go for a soda. That's when we always talk. Let's go to Sonic for a soda. Mm-hmm. Get to Sonic. And I'm like, hey man, talk to me. What is going on? This doesn't seem like it's you. And he was just like, I don't know, Dad. He's like, I was just with him and I've only known him for a month. And, I just he kept telling me to do it. And I was afraid that if I didn't do it, he wouldn't hang out with me anymore. And my son is not like that. He's a leader, and people kind of gravitate to him. I'm like, I don't understand this, Mason. I was like, you're on the football team. You got all these friends on the football team. You got all these friends here. You got all these friends here. Like, you're a popular kid. Like, why would you feel that you need to do that? And he looked at me. I'll never forget this, man. And this is where, like, you should never, I've heard this so many times, never label your kid, right? Oh, he's this. So he doesn't, he's whatever. And he looked at me and he goes, but do I, Dad? You ever see me hang out with anybody on the football team? And he's a first string starter. He's a great player. He's like, you ever see me hang out with anybody on the football team? I'm like, no, I haven't actually for probably this whole season. He's like, yeah. He's like, I get out there, I do my job, I come back. He's like, have you noticed what's happened to my life, like with my friends over the past 6 months? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, 2 of my friends I hung out with every day moved. The other 2 got into really bad stuff, and I wrote them off as friends. So I started hanging out with this individual. I'm not going to say his name. I hung out with him. I knew he wasn't a great person, but he was somebody to hang out with. And I thought to myself, if I didn't do that, it would be another person that I was losing. And dude, it just freaking hit me like a ton of bricks, man. I actually kind of broke down. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, okay. I was like, here's what we're going to do. I am not going to ground you for 90 days. I'm not going to take your social circle away from you. I don't want you really hanging out with this kid anymore, but you have a few other friends you're hanging out with. But here's what we're going to do. I was like, I'm going to create some structure for you, because this was over the summer. And the structure was this: every morning up at 9 a.m., you can have breakfast from 9 to 10. From 10 to 11, you can exercise. And then from 11 to 12, I'm going to give you 3 identified chores that you have to do. And then from whenever you get done with those chores, you have until 5 p.m. to go play with friends. You're home for dinner every night, or you go to football practice, and then you can go back out till 8:30. But that's the structure. And then I had him doing things in the morning, like gratitude in the morning and then gratitude in the evening. And he thrived in that structure, did really, really well. And the final thing I did with him was I took him to the police station after 6 weeks of this structure. And we sat down with this cop. And this is what really hit it home for him. I said, listen, this is not a reprimand. I told him before we went in, I was like, this is a lesson. I was like, I just want you to hear whatever this cop is going to say. I have no idea what he's going to say, but I want you to hear from him what the ramifications of what this could have been. And the cop sat him down, and he really hit Mason between the eyes in a very gentle way. And he was just like, he's looking at him and he goes, son, he goes, I see bad kids all the time, and I see good kids. You look like a good kid that just made a mistake. He goes, but you're also just as bad as the company that you keep. So I'll put that in your ear. The second thing is this: he's looking at Mason. He's like, aesthetically, you look like a leader to me, son. Play football. You're a good looking kid. You're strong. He's like, anytime you're in a situation where you want to stand up for what you believe in, I guarantee people will follow you. You just have to step into that leader role. People will follow you if you're the one speaking up saying, I'm going to do the right thing. He's like, and the people that don't, they weren't worth hanging out with in the first place. And what I can tell you, that was 9 months ago. Ever since then, Mason has been like this stand-up leader in his circle of friends. And he's got this newfound, like, humble confidence about him that I haven't seen before that incident. So it ended up being really, really good. So, I wouldn't say the way I responded was pretty at first, but it turned out to be a really great experience for both of us.
Yeah. Wow. It's super powerful. I think it's going to help the parents listening, parents of teens or soon to be teens. My son just turned 13. So I'm listening, got my attention big time here. So cool. I got confused. You said, I never want to label my kids, and then you keep calling him a leader. So is that, how do you reconcile that in yourself?
That's, so when I say label my kids, so with my kids, and I've noticed I've done this in the past. Like, so leadership, it's a characteristic that I see him exemplify a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I was labeling him, and again, from a psychological standpoint or a counselor point of view, I don't even know if I'm using the word labeling right. But the way I've always labeled my son, like, is like, oh, like he's a fantastic football player. Like he's got all these friends that are talking to him. He's got good grades. He's got girls that like him. His life, he has no problems. Like, that's how I view him. So like when he's struggling mentally, like people in my life are leaving me and I don't really actually have that good of friends on the football team. I'm viewing him through a lens that actually isn't true. Yeah, I'm not seeing him.
There's a bigger picture, right? If we just put a label like leader or outgoing or whatever, when they do struggle, we might miss it, right?
Yeah,
kind of what you're saying. Yeah, that's great, helpful. Yeah, and I'm getting you're also a pretty damn involved father.
Yeah,
like you're not going to work from 8 to 6 and just trying to get a couple hours with your kids in and then parenting them a little bit on weekends while you also try to take care of yourself. Like, can you give us, like, what have you been a sort of a part-time stay-at-home dad? Have you done the nights and weekends thing? Like where, because I think I'm just really respecting your level of involvement here. So what is it exactly?
So anything that basically like it goes both ways. So I live my life and I bring my kids along, and then my kids live their life and they bring me along. And I would say it's a great mixture of both. Like, because the thing, and to be honest, what I really love to do is allow them to do 80% of that leading when it comes to their interests, the things that light them up, the things that they want to do, the things that they want to try. Like my kids were wanting to be like, hey dad, like, have you ever thought about what it would look like to put a backsplash in the kitchen? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to. I have no idea how to do it. And they're like, we don't either. I was like, let's all go learn. Like, that's what they said. Let's all go learn. I'm like, all right, great. Yeah. So go up to Home Depot and learn. Anything that we've ever done, like I never shot a firearm before the time I actually learned with my kids.
Yeah.
I've never done archery before I learned it with my kids. I never did Krav Maga until my oldest was interested, and he's like, I want to go try that. I'm like, I want to too. Let's go. So, really involved. Like our family, we do a lot together. Our mantra in the family is experiences over stuff, connection and experiences over stuff.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So we're always trying to do things together. And I would say, stay at home dad. I mean, yeah, obviously I work out of my house. So like, today I took 4 hours off and I went sledding with them. Yesterday I took half the day off, went sledding with them because it's snowing like crazy here right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't hesitate to cancel things, or, if it's something that's going to be meaningful that we can put in the memory bank.
Yeah. Amen to that, dude. I'm so with you. A couple more questions before we wrap up here. Screen time. How have you navigated that over the years?
Whew. So screen time is limited in my house. So my two oldest boys, they have phones. When it comes to YouTube and TikTok and all that other stuff, they have 1 hour of that a day. That's it. And then we have their phones set up to where after they've reached that hour, those apps completely shut down. They can still
how do you set that up? Just give us the quick app or what's the technology?
You do it a couple different ways. Number one, if you have an iPhone. So my wife actually manages from her phone. So I think it's in the parental controls setting. So if you're on a family plan, you can do that from the lead phone, quote unquote.
Okay, got it.
There's also an app out there that we use called Bark, and that's it detects keywords and text messages and social media and internet searches, anything that, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, all those things. It detects that. But you can also shut things down from that app too. But yeah, it's 1 hour, and then like PlayStation, stuff like that, 1 hour. We're really big on reducing screen time.
Yeah. I'm with you. We don't have phones yet. We barely do anything else, movies or anything. So, but it's approaching, and we're going to be opening that door as our kids get older. So I always like to just ask parents, well, how have you done it? It's cool. Larry, this has been awesome. I always ask my guests the same question here at the end, which is, if you, part of our mission is to reach young people and get relationship education into more people's hands. And if I had 1,000 high schoolers in a room and I could only teach them one thing about relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Oh man, that's a That's an incredible question. I would say one of the most powerful things that you can do is come to every conversation with curiosity and appreciation. And what I mean by that is when you come to a conversation with curiosity and appreciation, you're not coming with expectation and agenda. So like if I'm going to come talk to somebody or do something, right, it's because I have an agenda of what I want to talk about and I have a desired end state of how I want that thing to turn out. And what usually happens, why I say curiosity and appreciation, because it makes us better listeners.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm curious, like if I come to a conversation with you, Jason, like when I interviewed you on the podcast, I'm curious to learn and I'm appreciative of what you're telling me. And I think if we come to conversations like that, we're going to be much better listeners. And I think we're also going to be much more in tune with not only the words that person is saying, but how they feel, and being able to maybe even identify emotions that they're feeling as they're talking to you.
Yeah. Amen. Love it. Cool, Larry. How can dads and or moms or anyone really find out about what you're up to in your podcast?
For sure. You can find everything we're doing at thedadedge.com. It's the easiest way to find us. And then podcast, it's everywhere. We're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, obviously, wherever you listen to podcasts, even Pandora Radio now and iHeartRadio, we're there as well. You can just search Dad Edge, and I'm sure every way to get a hold of us will come right up.
Cool. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for all the hard work, also from the trenches of fatherhood and family time, and just sharing your wisdom with us.
Back at you, my friend.
All right. Go check out Larry's work at thedadedge.com, thedadedge.com, if you want to get involved in his community and check out his offerings. I think they're pretty cool. Really, men holding each other accountable is always cool to me and has helped me tremendously in my own life. The next action step I want you to consider, there's several nuggets from this interview, I think. One that stands out to me that we do from time to time is checking in with our kids every day. He said they check in on 3 things. I don't remember him saying the third, but the first 2 were, what was a high or something you did well today, right? So kids focus on what they did well. Another one was, what was a challenge or a failure or a mistake you made today? And so it gets kids comfortable talking about, where they fell down. And just think about repeated habits of that over many years. You get a human being who's totally okay talking about the highs and lows of life, versus parents trying to contort their kids into a box, saying you're only doing well, and you're my accoutrements, and I want to present to the world that I'm great and I'm a great dad, so you better have your shit together, right? That's a very different style and approach. So that, I think, is a cool check-in you could do every day with your kids if you have kids. One that I liked from the Aaron Huey podcast we did on parenting was the daily dinner ritual, right? Being together as a family in the evenings. Different podcast episode. Larry, I think, does that, but didn't talk about it here. And just working on himself to become a better father and having really a lot of actual time with the kids and not punishing kids. Anyway, there are some good takeaways from the shoplifting story to, the leader and labeling our kids story to his own story. So create your little action step out of some of these. And then again, share it with someone in your life, your partner or a friend or a fellow father, perhaps. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. So good to have you as a listener, and I really appreciate it. Feel free to leave us a review on iTunes, or rather Apple Podcasts now, if you have not done so already, and you're getting value here. Thanks again. Hey there. Do you know how to get back to a good place all the time in your closest relationships? If not, which a lot of people are a no to that question, then come learn with me, okay? I'm going to show you how to get back to a good place quickly on my most recent masterclass, right? That is this week. Go to relationshipschool.com/masterclass to get all the details. And all I'm going to be talking about is how do we get back to a good place? Because I think if you can figure this out in your relational life, your relationships will strengthen, deepen, and become more secure over time. Okay, so join me, relationshipschool.com/masterclass. As you know, I've dedicated my life to helping people with their relationships, right? I want to solve this problem so that all of you can work through your differences and have fulfilling, amazing, badass partnerships and relationships, family, coworkers, friends, whoever. And I have trained a ton of relationship coaches, almost 100 certified relationship coaches, to help you specifically work through your relationship challenges. So I want to invite you to a special deal we're offering to the podcast listener where you can get 50% off your first month of coaching with one of our amazing relationship coaches. Okay, if you're tired of therapy, it feels like that's going around in a circle, or you want to actually set goals and accomplish your relationship goals, hire a relationship coach. Okay, go to relationshipschool.com/get coaching now, and then use the coupon code FIRST50 to get the 50% deal off your first month of relationship coaching. Super psyched to have our amazing coaches serve you and help you get to the next level. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.